management just has an epiphany that, hey, we have all this data, why are we not getting value out of it? But what that does require is that for you to have rules that you can actually code and check for in code, someone has to define the rules. One failure point is also that you have a network and you have your framework and you have actually implemented that, but the people who hold the responsibilities actually have no power. And that makes, governance without the power to do your responsibility is pointless.
Welcome back to Data Reality Check, where data meets the real world. This season, we're focusing on something that sits underneath almost every data and AI challenge that all the organizations are facing right now. But it really is still deeply misunderstood. Governance. Not governance as policies and committees, not governance as something that lives in documents, but governance as something that either helps teams move forward responsibly or quietly gets ignored. So today's core question is simple and uncomfortable. Why does governance so often exist on paper, but fail in practice? To explore this, I'm joined by someone who brings very grounded, delivery-oriented perspective on governance. I'm really happy to welcome Säde Haveri to the show. Säde works in the intersection of data governance, ethics, and real delivery environments. And what I appreciate about her perspective is that she doesn't treat governance as something separate from delivery. She looks at how governance actually shows up, fails to show up in a day-to-day decisions with the trade-off and the pressure situations. And Säde brings a very human, pragmatic view to governance, one that recognizes both constraints and responsibility. Säde, welcome to Data Reality Check.
Thank you. Great to be here. And it was also especially the timing is great since we actually met last week. So it's good that there was, now we get to continue the conversation almost immediately.
Yeah, that's actually super perfect. I love to meet you in person in Helsinki and having these difficult conversations, let's say, or our experiences on having these difficult conversations. I want to start with a part that a lot of us in data governance recognize. So, organizations invest a lot of time defining governance frameworks, principles, policies on paper. Everything looks good. Maybe it was defined 5 years ago and no one will review it. Maybe it's just a PowerPoint presentation or they pay some kind of a consultant at some point to get this information. But yet the teams are under pressure. The deadlines are still there, maybe not to be met on time. Priorities shift and governance often disappears. And that papers stay there just getting some dust. From your experience, why does this gap between governance design and governance practice happen so consistently?
Well, I think there's still some debate in general that is governance supposed to be this kind of rigid framework that is preset, or is it something that is kind of embedded into the kind of existing flow and existing roles and existing ways of working of organization? I have referred to this as the non-invasive way. I mean, there is a book there by Mr. Steiner on this, but I'm not referring to the book as such. I just really love the word non-invasive. So I think that's one thing, that the data governance needs to be designed in a way that it actually fits into the organization. Maybe another angle on this, you mentioned the dusty paper that no one updates. This is also that, governance, just as organizations and data, are living systems. So what looked good on paper 3 years ago doesn't necessarily function anymore in the current reality. So I think that there is this question of how to design the governance and then also how to make sure that it refreshes itself so that it doesn't become obsolete.
Yeah, that's true. I see these quite often when I go to do assessments and they are, oh yeah, we have a data governance framework and some kind of a strategy. And then, okay, show me. And then this was written by someone who tried to do governance or a strategy at some point. and no one review it. And especially now with the AI era, right? These topics evolve so fast that you cannot rely on the old documents that you will see, from 2 years, 3 years ago, from these PowerPoint presentations. Also, the organizational structure of the company might have changed, right? Maybe you have more data people, less data people, centralized, decentralized, you name it. Um, what assumptions do organizations make about how governance will be followed? In real environments, what have you seen that works the most? Of these kind of assumptions that they are, oh, it's going to work because we're doing this, or that.
I think that at least the assumptions differ based on what is the reason why the company wanted to do governance in the first place. Because I've seen different kind of like sparks why company has decided that we want to do governance. I mean, one theme is this kind of like if there is some bad data event that is causing like reputational problems, or company is not moving as fast as other companies, so kind of looking for competitive edge. Or it can also be that the management just has an epiphany that, hey, we have all this data, why are we not getting value out of it? So this also like dictates what is the expectation of governance. It can also be just that there are a lot of problems, and somehow it's thought that when you we'll just put some governance on this and then it will be fine. But I think the key is that you have to somehow like integrate the governance into the existing processes. So if you build it like as a separate process, that's not going to work. It has to be steps in existing processes that ensure whatever is the target. So basically quality or improvement or security or ethics, or like whatever is the kind of what the company wants.
No, and it completely makes sense. What do you think about automation of data governance? Because we have so many tools now, right, that we can automate quite a lot of things. What are your thoughts on that? Because you mentioned before this integration, right, with the current processes to make it seamless.
I think that there are possibilities for automation. I think all of this like shift left is like brilliant. Thinking that we should embed a lot of the kind of checks in the code as well. But what that does require is that for you to have rules that you can actually code and check for in code, someone has to define the rules. And those rules must exist somewhere in a machine readable format, and they must have an owner who updates them. So this is then like quite a lot of layers of structure already that you would need to get there. So I think that if you have done your basics well, there are good technical ways of emerging, also platforms that offer these kind of services emerging, but it doesn't, doesn't take away the thing that you have to take care of your fundamentals. So back to basics.
No, yeah, I completely agree because I'm a fan of automation. In my talk last week, actually, I talk about it as well, that you can automate a lot of things of the governance part. Let's say access control or masking of the PII data, quality, you name it, right there. Even the data catalog entries in a way can be automated. I mean, not the more complex definitions, but certain things. But if we don't have the right foundations, as you mentioned, right, if you don't have a committee and you don't talk about defining the policies or talk to your data protection officer to understand what's going on, right, what needs to be done, because maybe something changed in the GDPR or on the EU AI Act, it's going to fail as well. And I think those are one of the biggest problems, right, with these tools that are out of the box. They offer governance, but they don't put the disclaimer, and maybe the people don't read the small letters where it says you also need human in the loop and you need a human to design all this to be able to use these tools in the right way. I think that governance is often perceived as control. We are always, the data police, something that slows down the team, something that restricts them. But you also spoke a lot about governance as an enabler. So, what does governance look like when it actually helps teams make better decisions rather than just adding these kind of fights or frictions between the data engineers, let's say, or the engineering side versus the governance side of things?
This is going to be a bit of a story, but basically, the company where I work for at the moment, Relic Solutions, they do logistics and supply chain optimization using machine learning models, and there's also embedded AI there in certain spots to help. And I had the possibility to discuss with one of the founders, and she asked me like that, can I explain data governance, like what it is? And then I explained to her that basically the goal of data governance is to automate easy decisions or make a framework that kind of tells you how certain easy decisions can be made so that expert can focus on the harder decisions, the ones that require more time. And then she told me that this is how they thought when they formed the company, that what the company is trying to do is also to automate easy decisions so focus can be put on the hard ones. And I think this kind of shows that governance, it can try to achieve exactly the same thing as what we are trying to achieve with systems or products, or like we are trying to automate, or not automate, but make a kind of progression that if there are these kind of steps, this is the person who decides. If there is this thing, I can check from the catalog or wherever how this rule should be. If I'm uncertain of this term, then somewhere there is the glossary existing. So certain things that are defined automatically for you. This takes a little bit of the control away, but it makes also life easier and gives you more focus on the really difficult things that require. So I think this is kind of something that I kind of like to keep in mind, that our goal is actually the same. So whatever the company is kind of wanting to achieve, this is also what governance is trying to enable.
Yeah, I see. And yeah, because this is again the mix with automation, right? Just to try to facilitate instead of just being there behind the people, like do this, do that, and so on. But what do you think? You know, there are some organizations that start with governance, as you mentioned. She left quite early, right? And they already invest in all those things. Perhaps works, perhaps doesn't, depending on the motivations they had, well, like why to do it. But what do you think is wrong, or where you see the most failures when governance is introduced very late in the game, right? When after the delivery is already underway or already set up?
I mean, it's always the thing, like if I think about, for example, some ERP projects that I've seen, if you try to discuss data or analytics when they are doing the implementation, then they will tell you that it's too early, we need to get this thing to work, and then we can think about analytics. And my reply has been that, okay, if you think about it, then it's possible that you're not going to get all the numbers or all of the kind of data that you would like if you are not thinking about it in advance and not building it into the system. So I would say a little bit the same with data governance, that if you're thinking about it as an afterthought, doesn't mean you can't do something about it, but then you will have a lot of stuff that has not gone through any kind of governance process. Now, from both data and AI perspective. And well, I said, there is stuff you can do, but then you have to work with kind of what you got, because doing any big revamp would be very expensive. So there's usually no motivation or like a pocketbook to do that.
Yeah. And how do you shift the conversation from governance as an enforcement? Because again, we go back to the data police part, right? So, yeah, we are the enforcers here. You need to, you need to, you need to. But to shift this narrative to governance as support, do you have some kind, any story maybe from your previous jobs that you had been able to shift the narrative there?
Well, I remember that one example I used, which worked quite well. I mean, well, just maybe to start, like as in general, I usually approach this topic when I start talking about governance. So I kind of say that governance is normally perceived as something which is kind of closing, securing, tightening, but that's not how I see it. I see it as something which is opening, collaborative, making available. Kind of like saying that there are two flavors in governance, and I play for this. I play for the other team, not the first team, but kind of like how to introduce this as a concept. I've used trust. So I think trust is a really good segue, because trust is something that is not created by force or by mighty commandment or by like forcing something on you. Trust is something that is built and earned. So I try to make the core about trust. I think that is what we are trying to enable. Trust in data, trust in AI.
Yeah, that's so important, especially in the AI era, right? The trust that you can build and deliver to the people who is using that, either business or face-to-face business clients. It's so important also for reputation. It's not only if you're delivering the right metric or not, or the right chatbot or not. It's a lot of prestige as well. It's about the returning customers. Is about many other factors that sum up, especially now that things surface easily, right? Because now it's easier if you have a person that doesn't understand data and wants to understand more about a metric, and they just run some numbers. Even when using ChatGPT, they will know, for example, if something is off even quicker. And then the trust is lost in the data team. And that's one of the problems that I have seen, I think, more often is the data team, of course, and the business always in a fight. They don't trust each other. And I think this communication needs to be fostered further, right? But I feel also this is not the blame of the data team. It's because usually the teams needs to do a lot of trade-off, like speed versus quality, or experimentations versus safety, or delivery versus ethics. So on those moments, I feel is when governance get completely on the side, right? And it's not important anymore. As you mentioned with the example before, like that you go there and you tell them we need governance and not we want the analytics now. So from your experience, what kind of trade-off the teams face most often when this governance breaks down?
I think that this now goes again to the question that how the governance is implemented. So if the governance is a kind of separate process that somehow exists, not connected to the development processes, then it's easy to push it away. Nothing forces you to bring the nasty data governance people to the table. They'll have some demands anyway. But if the governance is actually embedded into the kind of into the development process, so there are certain steps you can't proceed without governance. Of course, in the beginning it will be a bit artificial, but that makes that then you can't undo it, or you can't not do it because it's there. So this is why I think it's so important that the governance is existing in the systems and not as a separate system. But also in general, if we think about companies, a company is a system, but all of the processes inside it are also systems. And systems have different kind of rules and requirements, and systems fight with each other. So for priority and for glory and who gets to decide, and well, all kinds of things. And I think this is also natural that when new elements are introduced into existing systems, the same way with teams, if you have a team and you bring a new person into the team, that will change the dynamics of the team. So it's also natural that when introducing new processes or new steps, there is going to be some game and some kind of like a disagreement. And in the end, there should be kind of like coming together and deciding that how this is going to work together. But as said, in the beginning, especially, it's hard and it requires a lot of negotiation.
Yeah, I think that the negotiation is the hardest part. For the people who is listening, the data governance professionals, maybe the more junior ones, it's a very frustrating job. In a way, when you are too new, for this job, what kind of advice can you give for them to be patient in this part specifically, where when you have to kind of keep fighting until we get the breakthrough? Because at some point we get it, and then it starts to move. But usually it's a lot of fighting in between.
Person is new and getting into data governance, then first of all, well, this is actually my advice for a lot of things. It's get to know the history. So, like, why are the things in the company built the way they are? Because there's usually a reason. Like there can be a legislative reason or a historical reason, or there can be that there was some person, as you said before, that made some paper and made some changes, and then they left, and then there was a second person, and then there was a third person. So it's kind of like layered like a cake. So that's the first thing, that get to know the history of why the systems and data is the way it is, because that will explain to you a lot of the pain points. So you will find them there in the history, because the pain points are where decisions have been made that affect the whole. Maybe the other thing is that, well, as we have talked, the position of being perceived as a data governance professional, be it then a data governance manager or a data steward or a domain owner or data owner, I mean, it's a new role. It doesn't have that long of a history in a company. So as said, you are in discussion. Now I use the word discussion, not fight, but you are in discussion with the other systems. And this is an ongoing discussion. So to build the trust, it takes some time. So I would kind of like get to know the history, get to know as many people from as many different aspects as you can. Yeah, and also, I mean, group with other professionals. So we have really great networks for this. For example, DEMA in almost every country, where you can find other people who are sharing your struggles. So kind of like, yeah, find people that you can share your struggles with.
Yeah, that's great advice. I remember long time ago when I was working in data mesh, but we were trying to introduce a little bit of the DEMA framework as well. It was very helpful to go and to some forums and talk to some people to get some information in how to do it from the perspective of someone that already went through pain, right? So I think that's the building community, as you mentioned, is quite important.
I was just thinking that maybe about the building community. So it can also be done in different ways. So I mean, how if I remember now correctly, then how you and me actually met is that I listened to you talk on a webinar, and I thought that, okay, she's really like, I think we would hit it off. Like about everything you said, I was like, oh, that's like, yeah, I so much agree. And then I reached out to you and we started talking. So, I mean, it always makes the soul feel good when you find like-minded people and you know that you're not alone in your struggles.
Yeah. And it's also about being bold, because one of the things when I started also in data mesh and in governance and all these topics was going to a lot of meetups. I was going to Google to some meetups about data mesh or data governance and so on and so forth. And the speakers they had there, they will usually tell you very fairy tale stories, with beautiful rainbows and kittens and castles and unicorns. And I remember I was like, okay, this cannot be true, because I'm in pain, I'm suffering, and my things are not moving. Why do all these people who speak here? It's so easy. And I remember I was next to a man, and I look at him and I'm like, is it the same for you? And he was like, no, actually, it's not the same for me. I was about to ask the person, what did she do? Because it sounds so easy. And she brought on board everyone just like magic. And we were like, okay. So we encourage each other to ask like difficult questions at the end. And the person couldn't really answer. At some point, she was, yeah, I don't know. I just came here when it was already implemented. And I'm like, okay, that's another thing. She was hired, not that she's bad or anything, right? But she was hired already when it was the paid, the path was already paid, right? And then after the talk, I talked to her team because there were some data engineers and some people who implemented the data catalog and so on. And they also mentioned that it's still not even 50% through after a couple of years. So I was like, okay, that makes more sense. But that's why when I started to speak in public, I don't want to be that kind of person who only brings this happy path to everyone, because that's not true. So I want to be able to share all my pains. Maybe my pains are your pains. And then we can discuss about it. And maybe I couldn't fix it yet, but someone from the audience might be able to, hey, look, I was doing this and that worked. Or I already tried this and that and it didn't work. So don't go through that path as well. And I think actually I wrote it in a post this week about AI, the AI FOMO, that unfortunately on this IT world, sometimes we like the happy endings and the cute stories for selling more, for getting more popular or something. But we also need to talk about failures and talk about the difficult parts. So we actually learn, not just stay stalled in the same.
Yeah, I think there's kind of like, there's two levels that I try to think about, because one level is kind of the technology level. So we have, like, in terms of data or AI or metadata, we have different kind of storages that we build for these, and pipelines for moving them and making them look like whatever the business need is. So this is one layer. I mean, I know that you talk and just wrote a book about data products, which is one part of this big function. But this is kind of one layer is the pipeline. So kind of like where we store data, in what format, how we move it around, what technologies we use around that, which cloud provider we have, so forth. Then there is the stuff that runs in the pipelines. So the data, the understanding of this data. So the reason why we are building these platforms and storages for the data and the metadata is that we can use the data. I mean, we want to use the data. That is the goal. And the goal of data governance is in this picture for me is to make sure that whatever arrives at the, how to say, end of the rainbow or end of the technical pipeline is what the business needs, and according to all of the, how do you say, rules and governance and laws. But I mean, at the core, it's still about business needs, so what the company wants. But I think we sometimes get so confused that we only talk about this technical side, and we forget about the reason. Well, we talk about the pipelines and not the stuff that runs in the pipelines. And that's, I try to focus the discussion on the stuff that runs in the pipelines, because that's the reason why at least I'm in the data business.
Yeah, and especially now with that amount of vendors, right? Everybody has a technology, a tool or something. And that's the nice story, because you have brilliant data engineers and they put everything together and so on. But as a user, as a business person, I come and I have 5 definitions of revenue, 2 definitions of churn, 3 definitions of, I don't know, leads, let's say, right? And at the end, you lose the trust. Again, we go back to the basics one more time. The trust is not there. I remember I had a situation similar like this in this project that I mentioned before. And we have to, when I was implementing the governance as well, one of the first things I did was to create a metrics library, all the registry with, and we were like, okay, now we are going to harmonize this. And I need someone to be an accountable of this, because of course, business come they send a Jira ticket. I need a dashboard, or I need a metric, or I need something, and some requirements, very like, light. And then the data analytics person, okay. And then they build whatever they think it makes sense. Then marketing come for the same metric, and maybe they want, I don't know, revenue without returns, or revenue with this or that. And then another person from the team, or the same person, sure, I'll create it. And that's how it gets duplicated. So something that I did there was talk to the CPO and the head of product and tell them, look, business is complaining. You use this data a lot and you need this to make decisions. So I need someone to be responsible. We need to see it. We need to talk. And in that moment, the data director that I was working, he was really supportive as well, right? So he was also pushing to have these kind of meetings and have the right discussions to get a right definition. Okay, what is a lead, for example, right? And then they define, and then they will have the different versions of it, but with different names, right? Like, I don't know, leads without WhatsApp, leads with WhatsApp, but you will be able to identify, and you will know that the main metric is this one. And then we will have the data catalog, right? And then you have, okay, relations with the terms and these and that. But this is not something that happened like it sounds now like a beautiful story. It didn't happen in weeks. It happened in months, right? Just to get to these, and the people complaining, why do I have to fill out these? We had Notion at that time. So it was like, why do I have to fill out this formula? You're asking me for data quality or like use cases or data quality test cases for this metric. I don't know what you mean. And literally the description was like, if you have tomatoes and this, like super, super simple. But we wanted to know, okay, what is the right number for you? Can we accept deviations? Can it be these? No more than one, no more than two, I don't know, whatever it is. And they were also complaining that they had to give that, right? But we have to chase down. One, we had the first few metrics defined like that. People started to get the grasp of it, and it was much easier, and they were not complaining. And it became one more process, as you said, like seamless mechanic is there before even requesting your new metric. You need to fill this up. I know it, but sometimes you have to do it like with kids. You know how it is to fill this up, then goes to the analyst. If something is incomplete, it goes back to you. It won't go to implementation until you give us the right information. And then same thing, the engineer finished the thing. They review. If it's not complete as they want, it's not going to get published to production. Is cumbersome maybe, but sometimes as humans, we need these kind of rules, right, to follow.
Yeah. Rules, but also I think that when you get into that, because as I said, a lot of the data governance is defining things and like assigning responsibility for who is responsible in the end of deciding it in a definition. And I remember a case from a company that I worked with, and they wanted to basically write the business rules for one certain metric. So it was quite complex. So there was quite a lot of business rules. And there was actually a group of 5 people who were like the ones, I mean, they had other metrics. This was just ones that they started, but basically that they were taking care of the definition and monitoring and everything. And they started by doing a workshop because which they considered that it will probably be easy because they hadn't actually written all of these rules down like in a way that they would be machine readable or implementable, but they kind of had that in their heads. And when they came together and started like writing this, they noticed that they don't actually agree. But they didn't know that they didn't agree on like the exact definitions before they started writing them down. So what I've noticed that a lot of this, for example, related to measures or just knowledge about data in general, it's tacit knowledge and it's only in people's heads. And there are some written forms foundable somewhere, but they're not necessarily coherent or the latest ones. So it's a bit, I kind of like sometimes feel that just the process of starting this, because if you're going to govern something, you have to define it very well. You can't, again, when what we were talking about the implementation, so you can't put something in code, but you can't do anything with something that you haven't defined how it exactly is. And just this process of having people to exactly define something is already like giving a lot of information. So even if you don't get like, maybe that's also something for the juniors to keep in mind, that even if you are not automating like things from day one, just the fact that you're collecting the shared knowledge and actually putting it into a written format and somewhere where people can find it, this is value. It's not measurable that easily, but it is value.
Yeah, completely agree. What do you think about the committees? Because and Daima and the book and everything is quite strict in the roles, in how everything is formed. But I think we're shifting now to a more modern type of governance in a way, because the names of stewards, custodians, and so on, the people is afraid about those names. They feel like it's something new. It's not same with the turn of data match. Now the people is like super scared or so on. What do you think the role of the committees should be right now? Because I don't think that they are the ones who needs to resolve everything. They are just there to approve. It should be more a collaborative approach, between different parties within the organization. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think that with data governance in general, I believe in the kind of the domain model where you split your data, for example, to domains, and then each of those domains kind of organizes around themselves based on their needs and requirements and maturities. And I mean, there can be a lot of maturity competence differences inside a company, so you can't expect everything to be cookie cutter and everyone will be on the same level. So you have to like allow variance also in how the roles are set based on the where what the organization or domain is capable of doing at that moment. But I think that over domains you still need to agree on certain things, and you have to have certain like joint rules, joint principles on how to do things, joint tools. This can also be sometimes difficult. Like I know of those companies where they have multiple catalogs and things because they have emerged, like they use that and they use that, and then we discuss whose catalog is master. But yeah, preferably joint tools. So this is kind of the high level stuff. So definitely committees are needed to coordinate over domains and agree on the data governance. But then on lower level, each domain should have its own committee of sorts, but to kind of organize their efforts and discuss is the current like level of data governance sufficient, or do we need to go deeper? Do we need new roles? Do we, for example, need to split an existing data product into multiple smaller ones? So kind of like there is the practical stuff that also needs to be thought. That's not maybe now that's not a committee in the DEMA sense, but I'm thinking about like where do we need collaboration and groups of people talking with each other. But I would say that it's on multiple levels. But yeah, at least alignment on the domain level is required.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because my organization that I was, we had the committee, and they were discussing things, but they were never agreeing because all of them were data directors from different business units. So of course they were playing their own Game of Thrones, right? So they were playing for their own interest and so on. So in a way, we will bring them things to approve, like the main policies, and so on, or some other things that discussions we have with the data protection officer or so on. But in the data platform team, we started because we have their data product owners, and one person was focused on privacy. So she was in contact with the DPO at that time, and I was in charge mostly of all the entire, governance process in general. And what we did in this team, the data platform, because we were, expanding these practices to the other domains, as you mentioned, and so on. We created the basics, and we decided to prove everything that we were developing in the little data that we had, because as a central team, we wouldn't have that much data, only from central teams like marketing, finance, HR, and so on. But we were okay, let's try to apply the data catalog here. Let's try to do the masking and access control here, and then we allow them to copy, like use us as a blueprint, and then kind of modify their things in their own ways, right? Because as you said, some of them need maybe more security than others, less security than others, and I don't know. It might, you cannot be so police that everyone needs to implement the same practices everywhere, right? Because I think this is when we lose the people, when we are this rigid in the thoughts. And also that help a lot to start with the automation or the seamless workflows, right? Because we will know, okay, now we know, for example, with our own data, that we can run automatic masking in the cloud, or do the for data products, for example, how to do the full data contracts, and then the person like us subscribe, who is going to consume from there. So they will be, let's say, they will get an alert when something will change upstream. So they will say, hey, stop, I don't want this into production. We need to have a conversation first. And then the things again gets more easier, let's say, to talk to. But you need a lot of control in a way, I will say, but policies, as you said, without not constraining too much.
Yeah, how I try to think about it is that when I go to a company, I mean, preferably I want to observe how the company works for some months. Like, of course, if you're a consultant, you don't have this luxury, but if you are working in-house, then you have more freedoms. But preferably just to see, like, understand, like, who are the people working with data, what kind of technologies and platforms and what all stuff there is, to kind of get a view of the landscape, and then a kind of a feeling of how things are functioning at the moment, and who is, because even if there isn't a formal governance or it's not fully implemented, then this stuff that what data owners and data stewards and domain owners, the things that are defined as their responsibilities, someone is doing this already in the company. So it's not like there is nothing happening. It just doesn't have a name. It's not formalized. So you have to kind of like, you go in and then you see where those decisions are being made and how it's currently working. And then kind of based on that, you come up with the framework. So these are things that need to be done, but a framework that is specifically built for that company, not something that this has worked for 25 companies, so now I give you the same, but kind of something that is specifically built. And then you list kind of on the domains that first you need to identify the domains, and then when the domains are identified, I mean, the domains get to identify themselves. So in a sense, I might suggest that you look like a domain to me, but are you 2 domains or 3, or how do you feel like this is definition of domain? So then we discuss. And after that, it's like, these are your responsibilities now, but you can self-organize. And that is kind of this kind of gradual approach. It also means that, as you said, things are not necessarily happening very quickly, but people are getting involved. They get to be part of the decisions. No one is dictating to them that you have to morph into this or that, or you have to be together. Like, you can like kind of influence this. And I feel that this is where you often lose people, is if they feel they have no choice and that they just have to adapt. But this is kind of like, if you do it this way, I feel that it gives everyone the possibility to affect the outcome. And I believe that the outcome is better if those that have expertise get to give their view and their opinion.
Yeah, I think this is using, more governance as a capability rather than a function, right? And if we design this governance with the users in mind, then the people who had live it every day will adapt it easily. It will become a day-to-day thing, and they don't have to think about, oh yeah, again, I have to be the owner of this, or I have to enter the glossary term for that, or I have to, this kind of, as you said, like I have to. Because it's like a kid, if you tell them, oh, you need to clean the toilet, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, they're going, oh, I have to, I don't like that. But more that become a habit, right, in your day-to-day work. How do you think this way of thinking help governance to evolve over time instead of becoming outdated or ignored?
Well, I think that since this way of thinking gives quite a lot of power to the domains to self-organize, then it gives them also the possibility to self-organize in a different way. Because, I mean, that's not forbidden. You can move the roles around and, as said, split them, and you can split yourself into more domains if that feels suitable. So, I mean, in that sense, the idea is that the domain would kind of self-organize based on those needs that are currently there. For example, it might be that some domain, for example, logistics, there might be only limited need for logistics data in the company. But then it might be that the company purchases another company, and that other company, for example, is a company that basically does only logistics. And so they're kind of buying that to handle all of their, instead of buying it from someone. And in that case, logistics takes a bigger role. And now the domain has more demands. So you might want to split it into smaller domains, subdomains, or however you want to organize this. So it kind of like, when the company's needs change, also the need for data governance can change. And if you are allowed to be self-organizing, then this gives the possibility to organize. Of course, it also gives you the possibility to do the other thing, which is to kind of like stick the governance in the corner and ignore it and just kind of do the minimum and go with the flow. But I mean, this is then a choice. At least you said this, I think you said this, lead by example. And I believe that if you can show that the profit, or you can show the good things that can come out of it, then that makes other people want to take this journey. So it's, eating your own dog food is important.
Yeah, completely agree. I want to briefly talk about something else, which is ethics, because of the AI, era right now. That's one of the most important topics. At least in Europe, I think we're fairly covered about this because of the regulations. But you know how it is in the rest of the world. Is this discussed? But I think to a certain abstract level, and delivery is usually not concrete, or it's only tagged out with some new regulation comes, then you run to try to do something about it. Or do you see the biggest disconnection between ethical principles and delivery reality?
I think that regarding ethics, it's a very important topic. And yes, it has now risen to a new level, like as a discussion when it comes to AI. But in this, I would also I would lean on that if there is the data governance framework built, you have your governance manager, your councils, you have your data product owners, and data owners, domain owners, then these people are the experts. So they know where taking the ethics into consideration is important. And if you are the owner of data, then you can decide how this, what use cases this data can be used for. Is it okay to use for this thing? Does it, what kind of like checks or considerations it needs? So here I would encourage all of the data owners to consider as the experts that which parts of your data are such that ethics really needs to be considered. So I would lean on the network.
Yeah. I think, at least from my perspective, governance should play some role in making this ethical consideration being part of the decisions as well, right? And as you said, bringing it to the committee and having these early discussions is important. And not only on that, in many levels as well. As we see the rise of regulations with the EU AI Act or changes in the GDPR as well that are involved also part of these ethical things, we need to be more aware of that, and not only when the implementation comes, right? I remember in a company that I work, there was a new GDPR law that was, I think it was this one where the owner of the companies or the C levels will be accountable, of whatever incident that happens with some legal things. And I was mentioning them like, hey, we need to do something about it. We need to do something about it. And the person working with me in the data product owner, but for the security side, she was talking to the DPO and so on. And people were like, yeah, we have time. We have time. And we were, no, this is going to take a lot. There is a lot of systems interconnected. There is a lot of situations going on. And we were ignored. And she tried. And at some point, that I remember that law was coming on September or something like that. And it was like February, March on that year. And at some point, probably they got like a notification. And finally, the people were like, we need to take care of this right now because we're not ready and this and this and that. But it was like the last notification. And literally, no, actually it was later because I remember that my friend, she was going through it and everybody was on holiday. Everybody was on summer holidays. The owners, the people she needed to talk to, she was struggling a lot. And we were like, we already talked about this. We needed to do this on time and this and this and that. And it was super crazy. It was super stressful. We made it on time. But again, this is kind of the same thing with the ethical things. We don't need to take into consideration things until it's completely done, right? Or that we are like with the deadline breathing behind our neck, but something that we need to take proactively as well in the processes. We see a new law, okay, we analyze it, okay, we're going to implement the measures, okay, let's go. But unfortunately, I think with the hype, let's go back again to the topic of AI, this is ignored, right? So it's like we want to move faster with delivery than doing the things the right way. And then the fines come.
Yeah. I'm thinking about a discussion that I had in a previous company with a data owner, and this person said that they have noticed that their data is used in a use case where it shouldn't be used. This was not an ethics issue, more a compliance issue, and she was basically asking me that, can I tell them that they can't do it anymore? And I said, yes, you're the data owner. So you have the power. I mean, for ethics, same thing. If you see that there is some unethical thing, then you can say that my data can't be used for this. And here then is actually where is kind of an interesting bit, because now it's then goes on the organization side, that do they enforce what the data owner has said, or do they ignore? Because this is then that you can't have a successful governance unless the people who have responsibilities actually have power. And I think that this is also regarding the ethics discussion, is that, as said, I would lean on the system. I would trust the experts to know. But yeah, if we are going to give the experts the power, we have to trust what they say. And we can ask them that, do you think everything is fine with this? And then if they say yes or no or whatever, or that now this needs to be done or this needs to be modified, you need to do it, because that's actually something I've seen that where data governance fails. And this actually regarding also the previous questions when you said about like you can have something fancy on paper, but then in reality it's not working. So one failure point is also that you have a network and you have your framework and you have actually implemented that, but the people who hold the responsibilities actually have no power. And that makes like governance without the power to do your responsibility is pointless.
Yeah, I agree. So before we wrap up, I have two closing questions for you. First, what is one thing organizations should stop doing if they want governance to actually work in practice?
I'll come back to the goal of governance. So the goal of governance is to automate the easy decisions so that experts can focus on the hard ones. So I would stop only focusing on the hard ones, because I feel that somehow we are trying to govern the most difficult edge case without building the structure. So back to basics. That's stop thinking about the most difficult thing and build your basics. Then you can tackle the more difficult stuff.
Good. And the second questions, what is one belief about governance that sounds reasonable to everyone, but is actively preventing teams from doing the right thing?
I still think it's this, that governance is something separate, that it's separate from what you're doing, that it's somehow not really connected to me and my work. And that is kind of like the one thing I would try to remove from people's brains, that we are all governance. We are all responsible for making sure that the principles, we're not responsible for forbidding all the fun, but making sure that we do the fun in an ethical, responsible, and legal way.
Thank you. Thank you, Säde, for coming again. This conversation sets again, because we talk about this quite often, an important foundation. Governance isn't about control, it's about enabling responsible decisions and remove all these real world constraints in a responsible way. And when governance only exists on paper, it is not neutral. It quietly fails the people who need it the most. So again, let's go back to basics, start with the simple things, as you said, and move towards a better data governance without becoming the data police, but more embedding this into the day-to-day workflows. You've been listening to Data Reality Check, where data meets the real world. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch up next time with more real talk from the front lines of data and AI. Stay data-driven. Thank you, Säde.
Thank you. Bye.